Hey y'all, welcome back to part 2 of how I created this double layer skirt. Now let's get back into this tutorial. So once you sew the center back seam of your skirt, this is what you should have. This is the front and the back. Now we're going to set this to the side. We're going to grab our skirt lining for the mini skirt, I guess you could say, and we are going to pin that to the bottom of the skirt and attach our lining. Now I think I mentioned this in our last tutorial in the part 1 video, but to make pinning this easier, I would recommend measuring the length of your lining and the length of the gathered hem or the gathered end of the skirt to make sure they're the same length before you start actually pinning the lining to the skirt. That way you can just make sure it's the same size and go straight into sewing once it's all pinned instead of having to do any extra adjustments. This is what it should look like once it's pinned together with right sides together, and then you want to go ahead and sew this at 1/2 inch seam allowance. Once it's sewn, it'll look something like this. As I mentioned before, because of how the puff skirt or circle skirt, bubble skirt is sewn, the bottom of the outside layer is going to hang about 4 or 5 inches lower than the actual lining skirt. So keep that in mind. But once you are done sewing, then you want to just go ahead and pin the entire skirt along the waistline of the skirt. So just so you can have an idea of where we're at, this is what you should have. Now I have not sewn the 2 layers together yet. I just pinned them on top of each other, but this is what you should have. I did go in and add a few pins at the front of the skirt just to give it a little more detail for our longer skirt, but this is what you should have now. So now we can go ahead and repeat that same process of sewing the lining to the skirt and do that to our larger layer. Now once you sew in your lining, it'll look something like this. Now one thing I forgot to show for this part is I actually ended up gathering all edges, all sides of this lower layer skirt except for the waistline area. So you can gather this entire thing, and I would say for where your slit seam is going to go, you can leave the top 8 or 9 inches ungathered. Now just like how we did for our top layer, we want to go ahead and connect our lining and our skirt together at the waist. Okay, so this is what it should look like once it is sewn. The center back is pinned together where the zipper will go, but this is what it should look like with all the sides gathered except for the waistband and with the lining attached. And you'll also be able to see from the back side what I mentioned to you all earlier about the pins that I added. As you can see, I simply added a few pin tacks along the sides to give it more definition and volume. Now for this next part, we are going to go ahead and we're going to close up the sides of our shorter skirt, and we're going to gather this side here, and then we are going to sew it to the lining from the inside. Once you're done sewing, this is what you should have. Now we are going to go ahead and attach our skirts together at the waistline. Now, when pinning these 2 layers together, I decided to attach the top skirt about 1 inch away from the center back seam on both sides. With both layers pinned, this is what you should have. Now, this is the front of the skirt that you're looking at. And here's a look at what the 2 layers look like sewn together. Now we're going to move on to the last part of this tutorial, which is adding our waistband. The zipper will not be included in this video. Hey y'all, I know you're enjoying this tutorial and we're about to get right back into the video, but I wanted to take a moment to personally invite you to my couture draping course. I designed this course for the designers who already have a great foundation. You know how to cut, you know how to sew, you know how to create, but you are ready to take your designs to the next level and actually start creating some couture garments. You want to be able to create the things with volume and structure and all these different things. Now, in this course, we have different types of projects available. We have some that will show you how to drape a garment from start to finish, and then we also have some that are going to just focus on the techniques only. That way you can really get a good mix of everything you need. Normally, enrollment is $500, but if you're watching this video, you will be able to get this course for a discount. So at checkout, enter the code ESC tutorial and you'll be able to get this course for $350. And yes, we have payment plans available too. So if you're serious about becoming a better designer, you want to grow your craft, you want to see your skills improve, and you want to get results like my students who have been able to create garments like this just from being in my program for a matter of weeks, then go ahead, click the link in the description, and I can't wait to see what you create. Now, let's get back to the video. All right, y'all, so I am doing the waistband. Y'all, I am so tired. I messed up on this multiple times, but now my brain is working. So all we're gonna do, I know that I want my waistband to fall at the low waist, so where I want my front band to fall, well, only at the front. At the back, it's going to fall a little lower, but I marked 4 placements for this. So we marked our waist. We have where the front band should end, where the back band should end, and then where the hip actually is. The back band, I want it to be 6 inches or 2 inches lower than the front band. And this is, I want to say, our low waist. The waistline up here, we want to mark where the waist measurement falls. Yeah, we want to mark where the waist measurement falls without adding any like darts or anything like that. Just the waist measurement divided by 4. Then we want to go ahead and we want to mark just a line for the front band and a line for the back band going all the way across the fabric, and then a line for the hip. You want to mark the hip measurement on here as well. When you do that, use your curved ruler to connect the lines. Now you have your front band with no darts. You're going to go in, add seam allowance at the top, and then also you don't need to add it at the bottom. You actually could just cut this out. I accidentally added it at the bottom, but we will add seam allowance here. But for right now, you want to cut out this shape from here all the way to the hip line, and then we're gonna move this over to the other side. All right, so now I'm going to cut this out and show you how we're going to create the back. So creating our back waistband is pretty easier. We're going to start off by cutting out this front shape. This entire thing is not the whole waistband, but we're going to start off by taking this front shape that we've created and trace it onto our muslin or whatever you're using to make your pattern. After that, you want to go ahead and add a 1/2 inch seam allowance at the back to account for the zipper. And then you want to also go ahead and add 1.5 inches to the back along the hip side. That is going to be able to account for our dart that we're going to add. And once you've added space for that dart, then you want to go ahead and you want to actually trace the dart onto your pattern. Typically like to say back darts should be about 5 inches long. When marking your dart, you should have 3 markings at the top of the dart, which represents the center of the dart and then the 2 sides. And then underneath the center mark, you want to mark 5 inches underneath that point. That is going to be the point of our dart. Now we can create the shapes of our waistbands. The front waistband, honestly, is just a straight line going across, but the back, I wanted to drip down or droop down, so we are cutting at a curved angle for the back. Once your line is good, then you want to go and grab your ruler and add a 1/2 inch seam allowance underneath that line, and then also on your front waistband, mark the seam allowance for the bottom of the band as well. Once you're completed, cut both bands out. Now that the pattern is created, we can cut out our waistband pattern on our lining and our outside fabric. We're going to sew our entire waistband in 1/2 inch seam allowance. After both layers are fully sewn, we want to go ahead and begin to attach them to our skirt. But first, let's sew the top of our waistband together at 1/2 inch seam allowance. So once you finish sewing the top of your waistband, you want to go ahead and do a top stitch on your seam allowance and press over the seam allowance to the lining side and do a top stitch of 1/4 inch or smaller. This is how it should look once you're done. Now finally, we can attach our waistband. So you can do this in multiple ways. The one way that you can do it is you can attach the outside of the waistband to the skirt first, so only attaching the outside layer, and then you could go in and you can do a top stitch and fold under the lining and attach the back half of the waistband to the skirt. How I ended up doing this was I attached the outside of the waistband to the skirt, and then I attached the lining side of the waistband to the skirt as well. But in this way that I did it, the raw edges were visible. So what I ended up having to do was cover up those raw edges with bias tape. So those are two options that you have of connecting the waistband to the skirt. Once this is attached, you can add a zipper or whatever method you would like to close up the back of the skirt, and it is done. The only thing I didn't show in this tutorial specifically was how I tacked the front of the skirt, but that honestly was just super simple. I just pinched the fabric, tacked it, and it created this beautiful look. So that is the end of this tutorial. I feel like the ending was a little bit rushed, but I was working on this in the wee hours of the night. But I hope y'all enjoyed this. Make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. My client looked absolutely amazing. And yeah, thanks for watching, y'all, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye, y'all.